Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm 15. Have you ever been jealous of your other half? Like you followed him, got into his phone? Watch this video to the end, and you will find out how I was locked in the basement because of jealousy. I live with my parents, and I think their relationship is just perfect. I have a boyfriend, and even though we've only been dating for a month, I think he is the love of my life. No, really. You might think, what does this girl know about love? She is only 15. But you are wrong. Real feelings do not depend on age. Max plays on the basketball team, and all the girls from school are drooling over him and envying me. We spend a lot of time together, and I am just crazy about him. But he still doesn't know my parents. I'm afraid they might not like him as much as I do. But after a few sleepless nights, I decided that Max is my first boyfriend, and my parents must know him. One day, my dad suggested that we go to the woods for a weekend, and it was just the perfect time to meet Max. We agreed to meet early in the morning near my house. I didn't sleep all night. Max was also worried, but from the first seconds, my parents welcomed him as their son. They were very friendly with him, joking, and at first glance, everything was perfect. Did you introduce your parents to someone you love? How was it with you? Share it in the comments. But when we arrived in the forest, the rosy ideas of rest disappeared, as did the good weather. It started raining hard, and I passed out in the car because of a sleepless night. The parents wanted to save the holiday and went to get firewood, and Max was asked to set up a tent. When they returned, dripping wet, not only did Max do nothing, but he tore up the tent. Dad snapped and started yelling at Max. Even I was woken up by his screams. I didn't understand what was going on, but I was very embarrassed in front of Max. He drove home in silence, and I was ashamed. At dinner, my parents said very sharply that Max was not serious, that he was lazy, and did not suit me at all. But I didn't think so. I didn't know how to prove to them that Max was completely different. He was strong, cool, and the most important thing, I loved him. After the hike, my dad wouldn't let me see Max. So when Max invited me to the amusement park, I just ran away from home. We had fun, ate popcorn, and the time passed very quickly. I wanted to sneak into my room, but as soon as I stepped through the door, my mother deafened me with her scream and started blaming Max for everything, saying that he was spoiling me, blah blah. She told me that he wasn't right for me, that his father was a drunkard, and that all children were reflections of their parents. I couldn't believe my mother was saying that. I ran into my room and cried all night. The next morning, she came to my room, asked me to forget yesterday, hugged me, and invited me to the movies. How could I refuse her? We bought ice cream and went to find our seats. But then I saw the displeasure on my mother's face. Behind us was Max and his friends. They talked very loudly, drew attention to themselves, and laughed at those who made remarks to them. So I was suffering without him, and Max was having a good time with his friends. This enraged me, and my mother immediately grabbed my hand, asked Max not to embarrass us, and we left. The evening was ruined. All the way home, we were silent, and my mother's face read, "I hate my daughter's boyfriend." After the incident in the cinema, I was very sad, and I began to understand that my parents were right about something. Max was really starting to show a different side of himself. He screwed up the tent, never told me who his father was, went out with his friends and had fun, and seemed quite happy without me. I thought about him every day. I wanted to meet him as soon as possible. And maybe my parents were right, and he wasn't really right for me. I fell asleep that night with one thought. I had to break up with him. It was better this way. In the morning, I woke up in a bad mood, and I got a text message from Max inviting me to a party. My parents would never let me go, so I lied that I was going to a friend to do a report, chose a chic outfit, and went to the party. But when I arrived, I couldn't find Max anywhere. I was already angry with him because he had invited me and still hadn't shown up. After a while, I noticed him near the pool with Ruth. This is my classmate. She was flirting with him.
Ooh.
She was giggling, laughing, and constantly trying to take his hand. I knew I was here to break up with Max, but for the first time in my life, I was jealous, and I was out of control. Have you ever been jealous? What would you do if your boyfriend praised the figure of your friend or classmate? I wanted to attack this bitch, but they suddenly got up and went somewhere. I followed them to the basement, found a key on the wall, and locked the door from the inside so no one would escape. I didn't know what was going to happen, but my hands were shaking and my heart was pounding. I tried to peek, but I couldn't, and my palms were so sweaty that the key just slipped out. I didn't even notice it. When I heard Max say, "Wow, you're beautiful," I couldn't stand it. I jumped out of the ambush and started yelling at him that he was a traitor and scumbag, that I was suffering for nothing because of him, but he looked at me like I was crazy. He freaked out and started saying that Ruth just asked him to help her get the speakers out of the basement and that she was flirting with him, and Max was just commenting on a video with a dog. Ruth jerked and ran to the door. She tried to get out, but the door was closed. I searched my pockets for the key, but realized I'd lost it. Ruth and I were in a real panic. We were shouting for help, but we couldn't be heard over the loud music. There was no connection, so we decided to wait a little in case someone noticed that we were missing. At first, we sat in silence, but after 10 minutes, we started talking. Max joked about the stupid situation we're in, and Ruth and I even managed to make up. But as time went on, it got worse and worse. Ruth began to gasp, tossing from side to side, and literally climbing the walls. Max realized that this was a panic attack, and we had to get out of this terrible place as quickly as possible. Ruth's panic got through me, and I just started crying because it was all my fault. But Max behaved like a real man. He silently began to stack the old boxes on top of each other, wrapped his shirt around his fist, and stood on the unstable structure. God, you have no idea how much I admired him. And at the same time, I was worried. He broke the window, and in a few minutes, we were free. I apologized to Max for a long time that I suspected him of cheating and doubted him because of the influence of my parents. He forgave me and suggested that we always discussed all problems together. Max also found the owners of the house, apologized, and promised to pay for the replacement of the glass. And when everyone heard the beautiful story of our rescue from the basement, everyone envied me even more. Ha ha. We spent the rest of the party together, and we even kissed. Yes, it was our first kiss, and I still can't believe it. I told my parents empathically that Max was a serious young man, and I would continue seeing him, whether they wanted to or not. My parents weren't happy, but I'm stubborn and I can't be persuaded. And after a while, they didn't care at all. At the end of the school year, I was seriously talked to, and for the first time, such a terrible word, divorce, was uttered. I couldn't imagine how a 20-year relationship could end in one moment. Although, probably not in one. I just did not notice a lot of things. Maybe that's why they were so hard on Max. They didn't want me to go through a painful breakup. But they were wrong. It was Max who helped me through the most difficult first months of my new life. Gradually, Mom and Dad got used to it, already separately from each other. I used to drive between houses every week. Well, what awaits me and Max? Time will tell. But I know he won't leave me in the lurch. That's the main thing. And the fact that he is a basketball player is a nice bonus.
Hi, my name is Bella. I'm 17 years old. Have you ever felt that you become distant from your other half? While both pretended that nothing was happening? What if your friend was the reason? Watch the video to the end and find out how I overheard my boyfriend with my best friend and how it turned out. I'm not a very sociable person. I didn't have time to make friends because of the constant vocal lessons, but I felt really important on stage. It's a sense of the stage, the crowd, the glory. I've performed a lot and I've never been afraid of the stage, but I've never been confident. I felt that when I wasn't on stage, people didn't take me seriously, that I was becoming absolutely nothing. No one wants to be invisible. We are all human and we all want attention and love, but no one wants to lose that. Sometimes I even go overboard in how much control I have over people in my life. In such moments, my best and only friend always helps me. She keeps saying that I'm overreacting, that sometimes I just have to ask to find out the truth. Her name is Lexi. Unlike me, she's a blasé person. On the stage and in life, she's bold and very cheerful. She's the most optimistic person I know. She loves music very much and dreams that we will create our own band and leave. I remind her every time that we're not going anywhere without my boyfriend, that there'll always be the three of us. Have you ever heard of a love triangle? Ever been in it? What if you are an extra angle in this triangle? My boyfriend's name is Nick, but I jokingly call him Edward. You know, Edward and Bella. Lexi set me up with Nick last year, and the three of us still hang out. He told us that the school was holding a music talent contest and offered to take part in it. Lexi and I agreed at once. I thought this was a great idea because creating together helps you better understand what relationships are really like between people. We started rehearsing on the same day. Nick chose me as the lead singer. I was overjoyed. We needed to come up with a name for our group, so we decided to use the main letter of our names. Everything was good until I leaned over Lexi to pick her up at rehearsal one day. She stood up abruptly to startle me and accidentally hit me on the jaw with her forehead. Lexi asked how I was. It was the first time I'd seen her so scared. I went to the mirror and looked at myself. My mouth was bleeding. I'm very afraid of the sight of blood, and every time I lose consciousness. It happened this time too. I came to myself in my room. Nick and Lexi were sitting next to me. I started talking to them and couldn't pronounce the words properly. When Lexi hit me, my tooth broke off and I started to lisp. Lexi said that she would sing instead of me so I wouldn't have to strain myself. Nick supported the idea and said that Lexi had a very beautiful voice. I felt a strong injustice. Did he mean that she sang better than me? So maybe she was better at everything than me? We rehearsed for hours in Nick's garage, but I couldn't concentrate. The last few days I had so many thoughts in my head. I didn't like being in the company of Lexi and Nick. I wanted to run away all the time. And the chipped tooth wasn't the reason. They stood together and had fun. And I was like nothing. They looked good together. Maybe if Nick wasn't dating me, he would be dating Lexi. I decided to do an experiment. Was leaving your boyfriend alone with your best friend a good idea? I wanted to see what would happen. These thoughts did not leave my head. I was under a lot of stress. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror properly. I started to think that Nick wasn't interested in me anymore because he wasn't talking to me at all and I couldn't ask what was wrong. After all, in fact, he did not do anything wrong. But why did I feel so bad? I was torn between could not be worse and everything is fine. I mean, Lexi told me that I got too worked up. But what if she was just saying that to throw dust in my eyes? I didn't know what was true anymore. After the tooth incident, I didn't feel any love from either Nick or Lexi. They spent more time with each other than with me. My plan was put into motion. Nick and Lexi were already together, nothing new. I sat down with them. They only spoke to me when they had finished. Really, why interrupt it? I was an empty place. I had long since become one in their eyes. Nothing new, it was time to get used to it. Have you ever been jealous of your boyfriend or friend? What did you feel? What do you think makes you feel jealous? Lexi just asked what we were doing on the weekend. I offered to go camping. They agreed and said they wanted to spend time together, just as three. At that moment, I thought again that I was wrong. After all, Nick was my boyfriend and Lexi was my best friend. They would never do this to me. What would come out of my experiment? Should I have started it anyway? Nick helped me carry my rucksack, but then came back for Lexi's. I was already boiling like a kettle. I wanted to ask directly what was going on between them, but I didn't have the courage. I told my friends that I was tired of being on the road and decided to go to bed, covered myself with blankets and pretended to be asleep. I was actually spying on these two. I wanted to know how they behaved to each other when I wasn't around. Nick leaned over and took off his sweater. I couldn't believe my eyes. Would Nick cheat on me? With my best friend? He gave the sweater to Lexi and she put it on. When I was cold, he didn't take such care. Did this mean that my suspicions were not delusional? I couldn't get that trip out of my mind. I was completely unfocused. I didn't hit the notes during the entire rehearsal and my boyfriend got really angry. He said that he would take another guitarist if I didn't start playing properly. I was like a bottle of milk that was not finished, but they bought another. I didn't want to upset Nick, so I tried to rehearse properly. At the concert, Nick and Lexi stood next to each other. He put his arm around her as she sang. From what I saw, I froze in the middle of my part. I realized that I had been right all along. Nick played for me. You should have seen their faces. After the performance, Nick and Lexi came over to me. They said I had ruined their victory. Nick hinted that I was being inappropriate and that I needed to come to my senses. He offered Lexi a cup of coffee and they left. They left me alone. I felt like a complete fool. Nick openly flirted with Lexi and she responded to his flirting. But they both pretended that nothing was happening. In the evening, I invited them to my house. I was ready to talk to them seriously and get the truth out of them. When they arrived, they acted as if I wasn't there at all. They just kept interrupting me and ignoring me. They often touched each other, and it infuriated me. I said I was going to make tea. I braced myself to tell them everything. When I came and found them gone, I was even angrier. There was a noise in the bathroom, so I decided to eavesdrop. Someone was breathing loudly. Were they doing this in my house? I opened the door abruptly. They were lying on the floor with sly faces and were making erotic sounds. In their clothes? They started laughing at me. I realized that I was being cheated and locked myself in my room. Why do all this? Nick and Lexi climbed in through the window. I didn't really want to talk, so they asked me to just listen to them. They said that they were tired of proving that I was important to them, and they appreciated my feelings. If I didn't learn to trust people close to me, I would always suspect them of something. So they pranked me. They understood about my experiment when I was carrying 3 blankets. I was very ashamed. It seemed to me that I was right, when in fact I was completely closed in myself and my thoughts. I almost lost both of them because of my suspiciousness. But I won't let it happen again. I started talking to them about my experiences and fears, and I really felt better.
Hi, my name is Amelia and I'm 22. Have you ever suspected someone of lying and wanted to expose them? Watch the rest of this video and find out how I spied on the nanny through a hidden camera and what I saw on the recording. 2 years ago, I gave birth to a son, Nick, from my husband, Kyle. He is 23, we have been living together for 3 years, and Kyle is almost the same as our baby, just as helpless. All day long, he sits at home at the computer and writes his programs. He does not know how to cook or take care of his son. He wears the same t-shirts for weeks, sometimes forgets to wash and brush his teeth. From his appearance, you would think that he's a homeless person and not a leading programmer in a large IT company. I took care of my son and my husband. It was exhausting. And then my boss gently hinted that it would be better for me to get out of my decree to work and prepare a financial report for the whole year. My head was spinning. I didn't want to leave my boys at home alone, but I was also afraid of losing my job. And I had to get back to the office a little earlier. At first, when I came home from work, my hair stood on end. The apartment was in complete chaos. My son was all in pain, hungry and crying. My husband was sitting at the computer and did not see what was happening under his nose. I didn't have the energy left for them, so on the advice of a friend, I hired a nanny. Debbie, she was 18. Have you ever used a nanny or carer? At first, I was worried that a stranger would be in the house. How would she take care of my son? Because she was so young. But after the first week of her work, I calmed down. Nick was smiling, clean, and well-fed. And Kyle even started to look neat. Perhaps he was ashamed of wearing a dirty t-shirt in front of a guest. I let out a little breath and went back to work, but over time, I started noticing strange things. A month later, my son began to meet me with tears. I asked Debbie what was wrong. She said he was just teething. I wanted to believe her, but I had my doubts. It seemed that nanny wasn't always honest with me. My husband also started behaving strangely. He not only combed his hair every morning, but also shaved, which he never did, even for me. I came home once to find that our entire bed in the bedroom was crumpled and strewn across the bed, even though I had made it up before I left. And that night, when I wanted romance and love, Kyle was colder than ever. He said he was tired and fell asleep with his back to me. I was offended. I kept thinking that Kyle was ignoring me for a reason. Maybe he had a crush on the nanny and was having an affair with her, and he was not interested in me anymore. I was wondering how I could figure out what was going on while I was at work. I went to Debbie's social media profile page to see if she had a boyfriend, and I saw a bunch of photos with guys much older. My husband was exactly her type. I was beginning to worry that Debbie was hitting on Kyle in my absence. I shared my suspicions with a friend, and she advised me to put cameras in the house to understand what was happening behind my back. I never cheated on my husband. We shared everything. I decided to tell him about the cameras and see how he reacted. If Kyle supported me, then he had nothing to hide, and I had made up my mind. But my husband's reaction alarmed me. When he heard about the cameras in the bedroom and living room, he was categorically against it, saying that it was a violation of the right to privacy. Why did he want to protect the rights of the nanny? He definitely had something to hide. I didn't expect such a reaction from my husband and began to fear that he was cheating on me with Debbie. I couldn't ask directly, but I might have been wrong. And I had no choice but to set up a hidden camera without Kyle's knowledge. Look where I ended up. But I didn't want to be deceived. I had to. After I put the camera up while my husband was sleeping, I went to work and was restless all day. I was afraid Kyle would find that camera and make a scene. Then I started to worry that if I was right and Kyle was cheating on me, then now he was tumbling with Debbie in our bed in front of our son. I couldn't wait for tonight. to come home and watch this recording. When I got home from work, a worried Debbie stopped me in the living room and told me she had something to tell me. She had a guilty shock. A conscience must be a terrible thing. She was sitting with my son and sleeping with my husband. I would feel really guilty too. I couldn't wait to watch the tape, so I asked Debbie to postpone the conversation. I wanted to expose her and Kyle, to throw them out in disgrace. Have you ever suspected your boyfriend or husband of cheating? I rushed into the bedroom, got my camera from the closet, closed it, and started looking. And what I saw made me angry. In the video, Kyle entered the room in a bathrobe, turned on the music, and slowly began to take off his robe. Under it, he was completely naked, and then he dropped the robe on the dresser and covered the camera lens. I couldn't see anything further, but I could hear it perfectly. A girl appeared in the bedroom and began to compliment Kyle. Then they plopped down on the bed, she started laughing and then loudly and quickly breathing, and then it all ended with her moans. Everything became clear to me. Kyle and Debbie had a great time together while I was working. I was ready to kill them. I gave birth to Kyle's son, took care of both of them, and he traded me for this girl. Traitor. I wish there had been an image. I would have shown them their home video to see their reaction. It wasn't the first time Debbie had done this. Who knows whose husband she seduced before? The nanny should have been put in her place. But I didn't have any real proof that it was Debbie's voice. Then I decided to catch them red-handed, catch them at the most inopportune moment, to throw them both out. The next day, I left work early so that I could get home for dinner, when I was definitely not expected. I entered the house and was startled. A tearful Debbie sat in the living room with Nick, playing a game of Meccano. The baby was fine. I asked Debbie what happened, and then she burst into tears and said she couldn't hide it from me anymore. I told Debbie coldly and sternly that I knew, that I didn't need her to tell me everything, and asked where Kyle was. Debbie's mouth dropped open and she pointed to the bedroom. I wish I could have found them there together. But now I had Debbie's confession, which was enough to break up this circus to hell. I walked into the bedroom with a triumphant air and just froze. My Kyle was lying on the bed completely naked, and next to him was my laptop, from which came the same female voice I'd heard on the recording. I looked at the monitor. There was a naked girl who saw me and immediately turned everything off. Kyle jumped in surprise and started dressing abruptly. I was furious. I grabbed my laptop and threw it with all my might. Kyle was confused and said that I shouldn't be so nervous and frighten our son. I had to restrain myself from leaping at him and scratching his face, but for our son's sake, I decided to calm down and listen to my husband. Kyle admitted to having an affair. He met a girl on the internet a couple of months ago and fell in love. This had not happened to him for a long time. He wanted to tell me about it, but did not have time. He knew that he was guilty, but he couldn't help it. I didn't like to hear it. I got up and calmly told him that tomorrow he would not be here. Kyle immediately rushed to collect his things. He didn't even try to change my mind. I was sorry I was wrong about him and my nanny. I left the bedroom, and Debbie ran up to me with a sympathetic look and told me that we were a very good couple and it was painful for her to watch my husband cheat on me. She cursed herself for not saying it as soon as she noticed it. She was a good girl. What would I do without her? When Kyle went to live with his mistress, I was left alone with Nick, and Debbie started spending even more time with us, and we even became friends. She took care of my son like a little brother. I did not regret hiring her. I trusted her. At that time, I had made a big mistake and had trusted the wrong person. But one way or another, I got rid of the toxic person and attracted a new, bright person into my life.
Latex bodysuit was so tight that I couldn't breathe and the fishnet ties painfully dug into my thighs. I opened the dressing room curtain and waited in horror for my mom to say something, but she looked at me in silence, turned around and went somewhere. And it was clearly over the top. But a couple of minutes later, she came back with a fluffy Playboy girl tail and said it would perfectly complement my look. It all started one strange morning. I was having breakfast when my mother ran into the kitchen yelling that she needed help. I was the only one who could save her. I finished my sandwich while my mom dragged me into the car. What's going on? She started the engine and asked for my college's address. What's the point? My mom was never interested in my studies. She was at the parties all day long. As soon as we drove away from the house, my mom asked me to pretend to be her friend. I think she fell in love with a guy from my college, and now she wants to seduce him. Mom, are you crazy? We pulled up to the college and stopped at the main entrance. Mom pointed a finger at one of the guys. Here he is. My classmate, Frank? It was like an electric shock. I've been in love with him for a year. We've only talked a couple of times, but it was enough to understand that we were soulmates. And now my mother and I are pinning for the same guy. You will help me, right? My mother's voice brought me back to reality. I hesitated. This is some kind of nonsense. No one will believe that we are friends. And then my mom blurted out that if I didn't agree, she wouldn't pay for my studies anymore. I could tell by her attitude that she wasn't joking after she gave birth to me at 17. My mom never tried to get an education. I didn't want such a fate for myself. Hesitantly, I still agreed to help her seduce Frank. Hopefully she'll switch to another guy soon. My mom always does that. Mom decided that I would take her to the party where Frank would be, and then Mom would do everything herself. Scrolling through college students' Facebook pages, I found out that one guy's parents have left, and he's going to have a Playboy-style party. My mother was delighted, but I was not in the mood for jokes. I hoped at last that rabbit ears would be enough for the costume. At the set time, we're standing on the doorstep. I was burning with shame because of the tight bodysuit, but my mom was delighted. Some drunk guys were whistling to us from the other side of the street. I pressed the doorbell hard. Hurry up and let us in. But when my classmate Anne opened the door, it turned out that everyone at the party was in ordinary clothes. Am I being played? Anne explained that the other girls were too shy to come in revealing costumes, and asked what my friend's name was. Ma? I started but then stopped. Melanie. My mother gave me a reproachful look as she came in. I almost revealed her. While my mother hovered in front of the mirror, I decided to look around the house. Suddenly, I saw Frank sweetly smiling at some girl. My stomach clenched. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. Then my mother came back, and I thought that since she had noticed Frank with this girl, she'd decide to give up her crazy idea. But that didn't happen. My mother said that some youngsters are not a rival to her, and as soon as Frank went to get them drinks, Mom grabbed a burning candle from the table and went to that girl. Mom, stop! I saw her decisively holding the candle right to the girl's hair, and her luxuriant curls burnt into flame in an instant. Fortunately, the fire was quickly extinguished, but Frank's girlfriend almost lost her hair. My mom was happy that she got rid of her rival so easily. She was about to suck up to Frank, but I heard that the guys were going to call the police. We're leaving. Just what we need, the cops. My mother gave Frank a languid look and introduced herself. God, this is so embarrassing. The next day, Mom dragged me outside to follow Frank and accidentally meet him. Mom found his Instagram page and saw that he usually spends time playing gambling machines, and she took me there. Against the backdrop of teenagers in oversized hoodies, she looked too provocative in her tight dress. Everyone was looking at us, but my mother didn't mind. She was looking for Frank. Fortunately, he wasn't there. We were just about to leave when my mom called out. Here he is, and she dragged me somewhere. Frank was playing the dance platform. How cool he was dancing. I stared at him, and of course he noticed. Embarrassed, I approached him and immediately apologized for yesterday. But then my mom chimed in. She started bragging about how we could dance on dance platforms as well as Scott Pilgrim from the horror movie. What? Before I could protest, my mom grabbed my arm and immediately dragged me to the dance platform. I didn't dance at all, and neither did my mom. But my mom tried so hard. She was even sweating. And I was helplessly twitching, hoping to get a little bit into the rhythm. I thought it couldn't get any worse. But suddenly, during the next movement, my mom brushed against me and I lost my balance. Frank tried to catch me, but I fell and twisted my leg. It hurt so bad. He examined my ankle and said that there was no fracture. I just needed to ice it. My mom began to convince Frank that I was alright. Offered to go to another platform. But Frank refused. You should have seen my mom's face. She was burning with jealousy. I went to college the next day even though my leg still hurt. Frank asked me how I was feeling at every break. It was so nice. He said I was cool. He wished we'd talked before. He did soften me up. Could we really be something? But Frank immediately destroyed all my hopes. He asked if my friend was free for the weekend. It was like a bucket of ice water was poured over me. He had a crush on my mom after all. Fighting back tears, I said I'd pass on the invitation and said goodbye to Frank. My mom was preparing for a date all evening, sorting through dresses and thinking about what makeup would suit her best. I just wanted to disappear. My life was falling apart. In the morning, when she and Frank left, I burst into tears. What should I do if things worked out for them? Pretend to be my mother's friend until I'm old? No, I can't do that. Frank may not have chosen me, but he needs to know the truth. I tried to call him, but the phone was offline. Then I began to write to my classmates. Maybe someone knew the address of Frank's cottage, but no one answered. I was already desperate, but one girl answered me. And I immediately called a taxi. As soon as I arrived, I immediately rushed to knock on the door. No one opened it, but I kept going. And finally, Frank looked out, surprised. At the back of the house, I saw my mother sitting carelessly with a glass of wine in her hands. It made me so angry. There was nothing left to lose, so I turned to Frank and told him the most important thing. My mother was visiting him, and I had been in love with him for a year. I was relieved to admit it. How unbearable it was to carry this burden. Mom jumped up from the couch, throwing her glass on the floor. She shouted that I was a traitor and ran into the street only in dress. Frank was taken aback at first, but quickly pulled himself together and said that we needed to find her. It could be dangerous in the forest. After all, we were quite far from the city. We immediately went in search of her. I was so excited. I just wanted to tell the truth, but it turned out I just messed it up. Why did Frank react so calmly? Suddenly, he said that he had known the truth for a long time. Someone from college recognized my mom at the party, and rumors spread fast. At first, it was just fun for him to watch this, but soon he really liked me. But for my mom, he had a special plan. Frank wanted her to meet his father, because she was definitely his type. I felt so ashamed that I thought my whole face blushed. We walked through the forest for a long time and called for my mom, but she was nowhere to be found. We were already cold ourselves when we suddenly came to an old bus stop. And there was Mom. She was sitting there in her little dress and was already fainting from the cold. I ran to her and hugged her. It was great that she was okay. Frank immediately gave her his jacket, and we called a taxi. We went back to the cottage. We were met at the door by a polite and handsome man, Frank's father. He was surprised to see us like this and said we could use some hot tea. I even thought that he would really be a great match for my mother. But my mother, when she looked at Frank's father, was taken aback. Without taking her eyes off him, she whispered, "Is it really you?" Then she slowly shifted her gaze and said, "Lily, this is your father. Say hello." I could feel my legs faltering. I I think I just found out that I had been in love with my own brother for a year.